stream. Beautiful. Well, good morning, everybody, and good morning to members of the community viewing it on live stream. Good morning to our staff here with us today. Councillors, the gentleman at the front of the room needs no introduction. He is a very well-known member of our local clergy, Pastor Ron McClintock, and Ron's going to deliver our prayer this morning. So thank you very much, Ron, for coming along.
Thank you. Let us pray. Father, we do thank you for the opportunity to come before you at the beginning of this day. Your word tells us that we should be praying for the peace and the prosperity of our city. And when that happens, Father, all will be blessed. And so I pray today as this council looks and finishes off and deliberates and all of those things around budgets and things that are going to be taken care of today, Father, I pray that you would be the guide, you would give them wisdom, that you would instill in them peace and confidence to take this community of people into the next round of generation that we need to have. So, Father, I thank you for each one, for the expertise that you've brought into this room. And we pray today for the discussions. I pray, Father, for the peace of this room, that you might dwell amongst them and bless each one of them in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Bless this day. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ron. God bless and keep you safe.
Thank you.
Councillors, as is traditional in the commencement of all of our meetings, we pay respect to the Darumba people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and pay respects to any First Nations people currently in the room. We have a full attendance, so there are no apologies, pardon me, or leave of absence. Are there any declarations of interest in matters on the agenda, councillors? No. Item 5, no business arising or outstanding from previous meetings. There are no petitions, no councillor delegate reports. And are there any questions, statements or motions on notice from councillors? No. Awesome. Okay. Well, we'll get into the meeting proper, councillors, starting with pardon me, item 9.1, which is the operational plan for 23-24. Madam CFO, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, councillors. So the first report on the agenda for the special budget meeting today is the operational plan for next financial year. The operational plan is a legislative requirement. It highlights the one-year actions that council is proposing to take to advance our 10-year corporate plan. This year there are 70 performance measures, which is 4 down from the previous financial year. So these are all activities or things that we're going to measure that are in addition to our business as usual activities. So these are all of the things that are going to drive council forward into the next financial year. The budget has been developed around the business as usual activities as well as those items that have been identified in the operational plan. The operational plan can only be amended by a resolution of council and is reported on a quarterly basis throughout the financial year.
Thank you, Madam CFO. Are there any questions? Councillor Friend?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Madam CFO. I have a couple of questions here. On page 8 of the operational plan, notes under 1.2.1a, proportion of formal beach accesses that will have all abilities access, which I believe was a notice of motion from our Mayor at an earlier time. Have we yet completed any accesses, and when can we expect to see the first access completed?
We might go to the CEO on that one. Thank you. Mr CEO.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thanks for the question, Councillor Friend. I'm advised that we currently have 4 all abilities beach accesses at Capel Sands, Emu Park and 2 in Yeppoon. The work is currently underway on additional ramps at Mullumbin and Lammermoor beaches. So Lammermoor is LB3, which is where the outriggers assemble, and the Mullumbin beach facility. The 23-24 proposal will be brought to the council to determine priorities for the 23-24 area. That will leave us with 6 facilities, and it will be a matter for council to determine what the priorities are beyond that, or indeed if other beach accesses are the priority now that we have 6 all ability accesses up and down the coast.
Thank you. So, Mr CEO, the Mullumbin beach access has been completed or has commenced?
I'm advised that the concrete works will be underway in the next few weeks, and we've got some recycled plastic material that's also being used, which we don't anticipate to get for another couple of months, but by the end of the first quarter, both of those at the outrigger site at the southern end of Lammermoor Beach and Mullumbin should both be concluded.
Lovely. The Equity and Access Committee will be very happy to hear that. I have two more questions. Page 9 of the operational plan, 1.3.2b, review an options paper for councillors reviewing for community group development assistance. Would you kindly explain this?
Mr Mayor, happy to respond, and thank you again, Councillor Friend, for your question. Officers have been working with, I think the origin of that particular request comes from a notice of motion from Councillor Bello, I think. I believe it was Councillor Bello, in relation to working with sporting clubs about the development approval process.
Yes.
Work has been going on between officers and Councillor Bello and a number of sporting organisations. I think the original plan was to report the results of that to the council next meeting, but I don't believe that work will be concluded by then, so probably briefing in July for the July meeting.
Lovely, and thank you. My final question is within Livingstone's operational plan under Natural Livingstone, which is my portfolio. I note that actions for the shoreline management plan, which is our living coast to our CHAS, low carbon Livingstone 2030 and the biodiversity plan have targets of June 2024. I'm interested and would like to showcase what would be one action from each of these plans that we would hope to see completed.
Mr Chairman, if I could, I might call on some people with a little more expertise than myself in that area. Greg Abbott's is going to join us to respond.
Thank you, Mr CEO. Welcome to the table, Greg.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, thank you for the question. Another one? In terms of the shoreline management plan, one of the actions is to do with the storm tide hazard. Williamson Creek, under a 3-metre event, would go under and the road would be cut on the scenic highway. So as part of that, the public would be made aware of the inundation risk, and we'll do some further refinement around our emergency procedures. In our living CHAS, another action under that is the managing our coastal environment with general scarps, such as along Farnborough Beach. So we've been doing some work along there for all the beach incursions, about restoring all of those.
So rejuvenation through plantings?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The low carbon Livingstone. So Matt Baldock is currently undertaking a carbon audit, and one of the items out of that would be avoiding generating emissions through the behaviour change initiative, turning off appliances and only using vehicles or carpooling and things like that. And the last one in terms of the biodiversity plan would be, one of the actions out of that is to partner with our traditional custodians to facilitate opportunities for co-management.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for showcasing some of those actions. And Mr Mayor, I'd like to move this.
Thank you, Councillor Friend. Thank you to the officers for responding to those questions. And councillors, while I think of it, can you all please check that your phones are on silent? Thank you very much. All right, so we have a mover and Councillor Friend. Can I get a seconder, please? Or are there any other questions? Councillor Mather, your microphone needs to be on.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was just waiting for you to offer. Going back to page 9, Mr Mayor, Councillor Friend raised 1.3.2b. I'm now going to ask about A. The weekend occupancy rate for the Yeppoon Town Hall is 80% per annum. There's no mention of Emu Park Hall. Did we get something, not today, but something down the track? Because I know that the patronage to the hall has been minimised by the lack of air conditioning, which they have been asking for a number of years, because the people are feeling the heat, and they don't want, when they have their exercises and their dances, they don't want to feel the consequences of fainting, because this is what keeps them away from the hall. So that's important that we recognise that. The other one too, on page 17, individual performance plans in place for eligible employees, and 70% of these employees have a performance plan. Just very briefly, not too sure what a performance plan is and why only 70%. Can anybody answer that one?
I can either go to the CEO or the CHRO.
To Mr Mayor, the target, so performance plans, councillors, and thank you for the question, Councillor Mather. Performance plans are the annual agreement between supervisor and employee about the particular goals and aspirations that those two people have for the particular year, about how employees will go about their tasks, and that they actually flow from the operational plan once adopted. Essentially becomes the CEO's performance plan and then passed on through the organisation. 70% is the target. We are starting from a fairly low base. It's only a few years ago when we had very few performance plans across the organisation. So ultimately we'd like that to be everyone in the organisation has one, but we're being realistic about the targets that we can set. So 7 in 10 is the target at the moment.
So that you plan to increase that to all employees eventually?
I think in an ideal world, councillors, we would have 100%. I mean, realistically, there are probably some tasks, there are some positions that can do without that and clearly have done for a number of years. But I think aspirationally, yes, we'd ultimately like to have everyone in the organisation has one.
Thank you. On the same page, 4.1.2a, 100% of the identified actions for 23-24 completed. That's for the strategic asset management plan, and I think the previous manager, I don't know what his position is at the moment, but he would be aware, or they would be aware, and that information should be passed through, that the Mount Charlton pipeline still needs maintenance, and we need to include that down the track, that we identify the pipeline needs to have the valves replaced, and because of their costs, we need to make sure that they happen on an annual basis where possible. So just raising that.
If I can jump in on that one, Mr.
Sure,
CEO, I
sure.
think clearly going forward with the asset management planning process, that will be part of consideration. I'm sure the officers will take that on board as part of that overall review of water right across the Shire, Councillor Mather,
Yes,
because as you
when
know,
you don't
we're going through a very significant growth phase, and
I understand that.
all of that will basically come under consideration.
And that northern corridor is it's vital, and that as valves are vital to the supply.
Indeed.
That way. So if we're going to expand that area, we need to make sure those valves are in place. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a few more here, but I think I can deal with the officer direct with some of those, Mr.
All right,
Mayor.
thank you. Well, we'll ensure through the CEO's office that you get a response to your first question or your first comment, Councillor Mather.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, councillors, on the operational plan? Councillor Watson.
I've just been thinking about the revising the arts and cultural policy, and I'm just wondering, what percentage do we spend from our budget on arts and culture? Do we have an answer to that? I couldn't find anything, that's all. Is there any idea of what our percentage would be?
Well, that probably would have been a good question to send through yesterday afternoon,
I realise that.
Councillor Watson.
I realise that. It just came to me again, and I realised what I'd forgotten to ask earlier.
Yeah, I don't know that we'll get you an answer today, but certainly
Appreciate
offline
that.
we can do that.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions?
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, on page 24, 5.1.3c, number of community engagement activities conducted to promote the Get Ready Queensland. We've only had 2. I find that sort of, I couldn't believe that because there's so much activity going on at all times. So I just felt that was a little disappointing.
I think that was for a specific program, the Get Ready program, though, Councillor
Get Ready
Mather.
for
Not,
Queensland message.
yeah, and I think that happens twice a year on intent. That's not to be compared with our
specific to
engagement. That's
for
correct.
that purpose.
Yep.
Okay, all right,
Yep.
that answers that one. Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? All right, so we've got a mover and Councillor Friend. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Eastwood, thank you. Councillor Friend, did you want to speak to the report?
Only very briefly, thank you, Mr. Mayor and my fellow councillors. Predominantly, we know that local government look after roads, rubbish and water. Yet there are a tremendous amount of other projects and actions that are undertaken to create a healthy and prosperous community, such as economic development, our living coast, arts and culture, sports, community activities, and also encouraging growth within our Shire. So I hope that this indeed elevates our livability on the coast, and I fully endorse this operational plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Friend. Anyone speaking against? Okay. Anyone? Councillor Rees, you want to speak for?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Well, this is a really important document as it sets the direction for the coming year and targets who's responsible and anticipated completion date. So I think that it's a job well done, and thank the team.
All right. Any other comments, councillors? I'm happy to go to the vote on this one.
Yeah.
Councillor Bell.
Really briefly, I just wanted to share with you some comments that come out of an audit by the Auditor General there about the sustainability of councils, and one thing they pointed out, Brendan Worrell was the gentleman's name, that weak councils often reflected poor strategic planning and poor asset and financial management planning. So these sorts of documents are fundamental to the integrity of a council, and I commend the staff and all of the councillors that over years and years have put these plans into place, and each year they're reviewed, but importantly they are fundamental to a strong council, so it's good to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Deputy. And I'm sure every single councillor endorses those comments and is appreciative of the officer's efforts in putting together the operational plan. It is one of our key documents. All right, so we've got a mover, Councillor Friend, seconded Councillor Eastwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. 9.2 is the revenue policy, and this is a statutory document as well. And Madam CFO, would you introduce this one to us, please?
Thank you, Mayor. The revenue policy identifies Council's strategic vision and attitude regarding raising revenue for the next financial year. Council has, in previous years, considered the departmental guidance on what it considers better practice in terms of the principles. So those principles are equity for like property, user pays, meaningful contribution, predictability and fairness, and Council has applied those principles against how it makes and levies rates and charges, its granting of rebates and concessions, recovering of unpaid rates and its commercial charges.
Thank you. Any questions, councillors? Okay, can I get a mover and a seconder, please? I'm happy to move. Can I get a seconder? Councillor Watson, thank you. I don't feel the need to speak to this one, councillors. This is a fairly standard policy as part of the overall platform of council's budget adoption. So if you're happy to go to the vote, I'm happy to ask you to vote. So we've got a mover myself, seconder Councillor Watson. All in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. 9.3, the revenue statement. Again, Madam CFO, I'll ask you to introduce this one, please.
Thank you, Mayor. In accordance with the local government regulation, Council's budget for each financial year must include the adoption of a revenue statement. The revenue statement is an all-encompassing policy document and outlines the rates and charges that will be levied in 23-24, the differential general rate categories which will be levied, description of each of the rating categories, the special and separate rates and charges that will be applied, any concessions that will be granted for rates and charges, the criteria for cost recovery fees, as well as the criteria used to determine charges for business activities. In addition to adopting the revenue statement, Council must also pass several resolutions separate from each other, which are otherwise contained within the revenue statement. So that explains the number of resolutions that will follow this one here. Rates and charges are the largest source of revenue for Council. So the adoption of this revenue statement can ensure that Council can rate in accordance with the proposed budget for 23-24. So under the rates and charges that are applicable to the revenue statement, it contributes just over $90 million or 82% of the budgeted revenue that's been identified in the 23-24 budget. The changes in future rate increases or natural growth estimates will also impact the amount of rates and charges and other fees and charges that are generated, which will also support Council's approach to long-term sustainability into the future.
All right, questions, councillors? All right, can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved, Councillor Bello. Seconded, Councillor Swadling. Councillor Bello, did you want to speak to the report? Or did you want to reserve your right to wrap up at the end?
I think I may reserve my right, and perhaps looking towards the adoption of the budget as the last item, perhaps for my grand speech. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Anyone speaking against? Councillor Mather.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The revenue statement goes hand in hand with the revenue policy. And on a matter of principle, I feel that I can't support it because I feel it could be done in a different way. I recognise the rules of a democratic table and I respect the decisions. I respect all of the discussions that we've had, and members are aware of my concerns, or at least my opinions, in relation to revenue. The material put in front of our members today is all legal and transparent. I have no issue with that. It's just that I believe that when we're looking at fairness and equity, I don't believe that, in my book, that they actually measure up to my expectations. And as a matter of principle, Mr. Mayor, I just can't support it because I believe that there's a better way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. Anyone else wish to speak in support?
I'll speak in support of Mr. Mayor, but only just briefly. I kind of wish that Councillor Mather brought some of those things up in the budget meetings prior to, so that we could have maybe dealt with some of that stuff before we got to this stage. But notwithstanding, look, a lot of time and work has gone into this revenue statement. We've sat around this table day in, day out, literally for months, and we've made some really hard decisions that I don't think any of this table have been comfortable with. Yes, the revenue statement tells us that rates are going to go up, and we all know that, and it was either that or go into deficit, which none of us want. This community doesn't want it, and the long-standing of the Livingstone Shire can't afford it. I'm very happy to support this. Again, I'll do most of my wrapping up in the final document, but I do ask that my fellow councillors also support this document. We spent a lot of time with it, with this statement, sorry. We spent a lot of time on it, and I thought we had it pretty well wired. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. Councillor Swadling.
Just to further reiterate on Councillor Eastwood, I mean, the time that we spent on this, the considerations that we've made, it is a difficult thing when you're out in the community. People are doing it tough. We understand that. We work so hard through those meetings to come to a situation where we can put this forward. The work that's been done, I commend councillors for the work that they've done, and obviously the Chief Operating Officer for putting this together. So certainly I'll reserve my right to wrap up at the end as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swadling. Any other comments, councillors, before we go to the vote on this one? Councillor Bello, do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, I will, Mr. Chair. I think it is critical that I guess, that each councillor is comfortable in their own conscience that they are voting on what they believe are the values and principles that they have sworn to uphold. So I respect Councillor Mather's comments that she can't support this revenue statement because of issues to do with fairness and the likes. Whilst I don't take offence to that, but I find it difficult to not respond. I believe that this is actually a much fairer way to collect revenue, and primarily that we're basing it on the valuations of properties and not relying heavily on a blunt instrument of collecting revenue through what they call a regressive tax, which is our levies and charges that everybody pays the same, where we know everybody doesn't have the same capability. And that's generally reflected in the valuation of a property. Whether we like that or not, that is as close to the reality that exists in our society. That's why people who earn more money pay more tax. They may try and do their best to reduce the amount of tax they pay, and no one begrudges them that, but that is the facts of our capitalist system that we're in. So I believe our efforts to move away from that reliance is actually a demonstration of our commitment to be fairer, to be more equitable. that's the effort that we're prepared to make. If the community doesn't like that, I'm sure they'll let us know. But on the basis of fairness and equity, I believe this is the fairest way that we can collect our revenue. And this council has made a commitment to do that. And I'm encouraged to see that commitment here today once again. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bello.
Question. Is it too late for a question?
Yeah, it's too late, Councillor Friend. We've just wrapped up. All right, so we'll go to the vote on this one. Councillors, got a mover, Councillor Bello, seconded Councillor Swaddling. All in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. .4, the differential general rates report. And again, Madam CFO, we'll call on you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So, councillors, this is the first of 9 resolutions that were otherwise contained within the revenue statement. So this one is focusing on a differential general rates. The resolution is around adopting the rating categories, including their definition as well as the identified land uses, as well as the minimum general rate and cents in the dollar that is to be applied. There were minimal structural changes in regards to the rating categories this year. There is an introduction of a new category for extractive industries with a valuation of less than $12,000. The other changes that have been made is considering increasing the amount of revenue to be generated from general rates with offsetting with a reduction of our separate charges. So overall, the general rate revenue will increase by $4.3 million. However, this is offset by a $1.6 million reduction in separate charges. So that increase in general rates also accounts for a 1% increase in rateable property growth. So overall, this means that a residential property on the minimum general rate will see a net reduction in general rates and separate charges of 3.6% or $46.80. Overall, this revenue, the general rates and charges, will see just over 98% of our ratepayers paying 6% or less, which is remarkable considering where CPI is at the moment of 7% Australia-wide. The total amount of budgeted revenue from general rates, so this excludes discounts or remissions, is $45.4 million, which does, as I mentioned before, include an estimate of 1% growth in rateable properties.
Thank you, Madam CFO. I'm happy to move this one, councillors, but I think I'll just make some preliminary comments first, just to clarify things for people who are viewing it on live stream. Essentially what the CFO is saying is that there's been a change in the special rate system, special charge, separate charge. Historically, councils had three separate charges. There's been the environmental levy, there's been the road levy, and then there's been the disaster management levy. Councillor Bello alluded to this earlier in his proposal to support the revenue statement, when he made reference to the fact that some of these charges are inequitable and have been inequitable. Now, there's been some debate around the table during the budget workshops about this particular topic. But the majority of the council table feels that having a road charge of approximately $500 flat rate right across the board for everybody to pay is inequitable, because a transport company with semi-trailers and a fleet of semi-trailers and trucks pays exactly the same amount as a pensioner who goes to the shops once a week. And as the majority of this table has felt, that's inequitable. And so the councillors today are basically voting to change that, and that process started this time last year. So those 3 charges will eventually be phased out, and that's part of the saving and the reduction for the community. Yes, that will be transferred across to the general rate, but general rates are based on property valuations, which, as you know, are more reflective of people's ability to pay. Generally speaking, the lower the value of the property, it is indicative of people's socio-economic circumstances. So this table felt that in changing those special charges that we would actually be providing a benefit to the community. So I just wanted to make that point clear to the community councillors, and happy to entertain questions. Councillor Friend.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a question through you to Andrea. I do also agree that it's important that it's far more equitable with these separate charges, or levies as some call them, then added into the general rate. But we're also accepting within this particular agenda item that we're accepting the cents in the dollar for the differential general rates. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Question,
Councillor
Mr.
Mather.
Mayor. Which is the page that the recommendation is on?
It's on page 72 of the agenda, Councillor Mather.
Okay, because I haven't got that far. I printed. Okay, that's all right. You jumped the revenue statement and all the differentials and all the land categories. That's all right. We've jumped over them. That's fine, Mr.
All right,
Mayor.
yeah. So essentially, in adopting this report, councillors, you are adopting the differential categories, their descriptions, and just correct me, Madam CFO, the rate in the dollar and the minimum general rate.
I'm fine with that. I'm fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, councillors? All right. I'm happy to move. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Eastwood, thank you. I've had my say, councillors. Anyone speaking against? Would anyone like to speak for? Councillor Eastwood, would you like to speak for?
Yes, Mr Mayor. Look, I guess this is where the rubber hits the road, and this was probably the hardest of all the things that we spoke about during the whole budget process. And I know initially I was adamant that I was going to keep rate rises below 5% across the board. And the further that we delved into it and looked at the financial situation in our future, I could see that was never going to happen and just wasn't a possibility. Councillors, we don't only have this year to think about. We've got the future of this council into the future, or into the... and one of the things, you know, we need to make sure that we stay viable forever and a day. We've got a council next door that would probably love to see us roll over, and we're just not going to let that happen. So we need to make sure that we make hard decisions. And nobody wants to make these decisions. I've got 2 properties myself that are going to be affected by the decisions we make today. All of us are probably in that same boat to some extent. And I just encourage you to be brave enough to make these decisions today, because we've looked at it pretty well and there isn't particularly anywhere else to go. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, councillors. Anyone else speaking against? Anyone else for? Councillor Bello? Councillor Swadling?
Yeah, I think, you know, like as we've talked about this around the table, continuous leading up to this day, and how difficult it is for us. You know, when we're making these decisions, we're thinking about a number of things that are on there. But to become viable, to continue to become viable, and to continue to live in the wonderful place that we live in, we need to make decisions that aren't always favourable. And we all, as Councillor Eastwood said, we all have properties. It affects everybody, every single person within our environment, our community, which we took into consideration. A lot of hard work, a lot of soul searching. I can say in front of all my colleagues here, a couple of sleepless nights going through this and reading the papers and reading the bottom line. And certainly, I think what we've come to is a decision it's going to really enhance us for the future and continue our growth. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bello?
Yeah, just perhaps if I could confirm in the question before speaking to the Madam CFO, ratepayers that are going to be under CPI, is it 99.86%? Is that the figure?
98.47%.
98.467. 98.
Huge.
Thank you. So just in supporting this motion here, we have 98.47 of our rateable properties that are going to be under the CPI. And that's come about, I guess, through the preparation of everything that's within this section of the budget. That's allowed us to be able to achieve budget increases of no more than CPI. And that is not an easy thing to do on a day when we know that inflationary costs are skyrocketing. So I endorse the comments of Councillor Swadling and Councillor Eastwood. And it is about the future, very much so. So thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Just in wrapping up, I'll make a couple of closing comments, unless there are any other questions or comments from the floor. Councillor Mather?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd have to pay recognition to our CFO and her staff for the intensive work that has been carried out day and night, I would imagine, to get to this stage for differential rating. I'll elaborate on that a little bit further down the track. But I don't want it to go unnoticed that the work that they have done to massage all of the figures, all of the valuations, all of the circumstances, all of the abilities to pay, and so much more to get to this point. I've seen 32 budgets. None of them are any harder or any easier than this one. And that's why we're still here, to keep our track on what we want to do and where this Shire needs to go. And with a good financial officer steering the ship and a good crew on board, the Shire will beam in time. It's been through some traumas. I've seen some traumas. I've been through them too. Like I said, this budget was no harder or easier than any other in the past, because there were always circumstances that have stopped this Shire from plunging ahead like it can. So I think that's all I need to say, Mr Mayor, just to thank you to the CFO and her staff for what they've produced and the hard work that they've
Indeed. Thank you, Councillor
carried
Mather.
out in this time.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. Well, ladies and gentlemen, just to wrap up on this one, the overall effect of adopting this report will mean, as the CFO has pointed out, 98.47% of rateable assessments in the Shire will pay 6% or less. Now, the general residential rate increase is about 6.5%, and for commercial, industrial and rural is 4.5%. Now, we know that times economically are hard. Councillor Eastwood has highlighted that, as has Councillor Bello and Councillor Swadling. And we don't take this decision lightly, but CPI is currently running at around about 7.4% according to the Brisbane CPI index. So in adopting a rate increase lower than CPI, what that actually means is that council going forward will absorb some of the increased costs that it experiences through its labour, through buying materials and goods and services. And so through this process of budget determination this year, we've looked at how we could generate efficiencies going forward. Now, that's been a key element around the table. And so in keeping a rates increase below CPI, those are some of the tough decisions this council's had to make. And certainly the officers have been along for this ride as well. So it is not a decision we have taken lightly. Councillor Eastwood also alluded to viability in the long term. No one can accuse us of bringing in an election budget. This is not an election budget. This is a budget that is about long-term sustainability. There are 77 councils in Queensland. 46 of them, according to the Auditor General's report for 22-23, are at high risk of being, medium to high risk of being unviable into the future. That's a staggering statistic. 46 of 77 potentially unviable. So not only does the federal and the state government have to get serious about how they fund local government going forward, local government is making the tough decisions about how it's going to deliver services. And this is all part of the determination within this budget, councillors. So I endorse it to the table and I look forward to your support.
Yeah.
All right, councillors, got a mover in myself, seconded Councillor Eastwood. All in favour? Those against? Carried. So, sorry, just for the record, how many were, Councillor Mather, you supported yes, thank you. 9.5, special charges.
Thanks, Mayor.
Madam CFO.
Councillors, there are 4 special charges that we levy as part of our rating strategy. So they include the Rural Fire Services Levy, the Northwest Emu Park Sewerage Benefited Area, Causeway Township Sewerage Benefited Area, and the Molumban Sewerage Benefited Area, and the Muskers Beach Revetment Wall. There are no new additional special levies being introduced for this year. With regards to the Rural Fire Levy, so that is on advice from each of the Rural Fire Brigades. Overall, the forecast revenue to be generated is just over $382,000, of which $228,000 is levied on behalf of the Shire's Rural Fire Brigades.
Thank you, Madam CFO. Any questions, councillors? This one's fairly straightforward. Councillor Friend?
Move, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Friend? Councillor Mather, I beg your pardon. Oh, okay, rightio, thank you. All right, so I've got a mover in Councillor Friend, seconded Councillor Mather. Happy to go to the vote, councillors. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. (9.6), Madam CFO.
Thank you, Mayor. Report 9.6 is in regards to our separate charges to be levied for 23-24. Separate charges are levied equally upon all rateable properties and are used to offset the costs of providing services or maintaining infrastructure. Separate charges are based on the equality principle in that regardless of capacity to pay, everyone pays the same. Council is proposing to phase out separate charges over the next 5 years, ensuring the minimum rate increases further reduce the rating burden on those less able to pay. In 23-24, the separate charges are proposed to decrease by 20%, so that means the road network separate charge will reduce from $380 down to $304 per assessment. The natural environment separate charge will reduce from $44 down to $35.20 per assessment, and the disaster response separate charge will reduce from $17 down to $13.60 per assessment. The total budgeted revenue for separate charges is $6.4 million, which includes a 1% growth rate for new rateable properties. Overall, there is a 20% decrease on the charges levied, which equates to a reduction of $1.6 million levied on the previous financial year.
Thank you, Madam CFO. Questions, councillors? Councillor Friend.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to Madam CFO. Just to confirm that this is over a 5-year period and we've already started this process, so there's another 3 years after this?
So the original intent was to phase out the separate charges over 3 years. Through budget deliberations with councillors, we've actually looking at reducing the balance over the next 5 years.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seconding, Councillor Friend? All right. All right, so we've got a mover in Councillor Bello, seconder in Councillor Friend. Any other questions? Councillor Mather?
Against, Mr Mayor, thank you.
Rightio. Councillor, I will go to Councillor Mather, Councillor Bello first. He's the mover.
I guess just to reinforce that in supporting this to our community, that there will be no less money spent on the various sections of these levies, whether it be road or environment or natural disasters and what have you. But we won't be collecting the money through a separate charge. It will be attached to the valuation of the property. We've discussed that fairly heavily this morning, but the important thing is the community knows that Livingstone will continue to invest, whether it be $15.6 million in our road networks, or continue to see investment into our natural environment, which is part of our community plan and operational plan, because they're the things we value here and that we're passionate about. That's what makes living in Livingstone such an absolute privilege. So the money will be invested into those areas, but we'll endeavour to collect it as fairly as we can, and that's been determined or projected to be done over the 5 years now to soften the blows of the economic climate. But it's a step in the direction we feel is the most fairest way to do it, and we will be financing those critical sections of our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mather, you want to speaking against?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, this is the real heart of my concerns, and I can understand and appreciate the opinions of other members. While we advocate that we're looking at the people's ability to pay, we all know that everybody's having difficulties one way or another, some more than others. And it's not just financial, there are health pressures at home as well, where people can't get help for their health. They can't get any additional income. We know that. The Auditor General's, the Valuer General's Department does not take into consideration people's ability to pay. People, and we advocate transparency, people expect transparency only because they need to understand it, because budgets are quite a complex item to wander through month after month after month to get a fair deal for everybody and to address the inflations, to address everything that we have to face just like any normal household. And probably we pay more because we have an ability to pay. What I have concerns over, Mr Mayor, and members are well aware of this, Councillor Eastwood may not have been here on one of the occasions that I've raised this. When I talk transparency, and you've got $500 coming out of your rates for your roads, people know that goes into your roads. Then they expect a service. If you don't have it, and the environmental levy and the disaster management levy, if you don't have them there, clearly people can see where their money's going. Whether it takes 1 year, 2 years, and we tried that, but it didn't work because it was going to be too much on the general fund. So we had to stretch it out to 5 years to lessen the impact on the general fund. What it does, by taking it off a separate levy and putting it in the general fund, you're inflating the general fund. And this is why, in my estimation, we have so much difficulty finding the differential rates. Because we've got to adjust all the figures, adjust all the valuations to fit into another band to make sure that people can pay. I don't want to labour on this one, Mr Mayor, but I believe that in my books that when I'm looking at transparency, I can see where the money's going. And as far as the road levy goes, we were lucky enough, and I was fortunate enough to have the support of the members, to get an auditor here to assess our workmanship and our processes in relation to quality maintenance. And that will need to be addressed down the track, and I'll be asking how that's going to be done. I'll leave that up to the managers. But when people know that we've gone to the trouble of getting an audit into our work, audit into our processes, they want value for money. That's what people are asking, they're demanding, they want value for money. And we need to be able to prove to them that we are providing that. I just felt that we could do it in a better way. As I previously said, the process that the council has taken or is taking, it's legal, it's transparent in their books. But I just felt that there's a better way. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. And the great thing about democracy, Councillor Mather, is that it entertains all views, supporting and opposing. And you are certainly and absolutely entitled to yours. Anyone speaking in support?
Yes, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Eastwood.
Yeah, I would take the opposing view to Councillor Mather and say that, as you already reiterated, Mr Mayor, that, and I think Councillor Bellows spoke on this as well, that there is no fairer way than the cents in the dollar per, rateable income, rateable property, sorry, just like the tax department in Australia do it. Like we said before, if you have a millionaire with a big truck company paying the same levy for the roads as Mrs Bloggs down the street, that just is not fair. So I think that we've hit the nail on the head. I think that we're working in the right direction. And Councillor Mather, we will, I will, while I'm on this council, make sure that the right amount goes to roads. So don't threat.
Yeah, I'd like that in writing, thank you.
That's right, it is recorded. Anyone offering an opposing view, speaking against? All right. Anyone else like to speak before we wrap up, councillors? Okay, so we've got a mover in Councillor Bellow, a seconder in Councillor Friend. Councillor Bellow, do you want to wrap up at all?
In many ways, you'd like to say that, I'd like to say that I'm right, or perhaps Councillor Mather would like to say that she's right. Ultimately, this is about trying to make peace with the community in the way that we collect our revenue in the fairest possible way. I agree that everybody wants to see value for money, 100%. And each of us here are accountable to ensure that we represent our community and see that value for money is provided in the decisions we make. Ultimately, it's up to the CEO and his terrific team to provide value for money in the work that they carry out. So nobody gets to escape that. We all have to stand up and account for that. This budget is at peace with the community and how it collects its revenue, because it's how basically Western democracies, which are the most successful system of government in the world, collects its revenue. I can't think of a better way to do it. So I'm at peace in collecting it in this way, and I believe it's the fairest way to do it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor Bello. We'll go to the vote on this one. We've got a mover, Councillor Bello, seconded Councillor Friend. All in favour? Those against? Carried. (9.7), Madam CFO.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, this resolution is in regards to our water utility charges proposed for 23-24. So Council owns and operates 4 different schemes that are spread across the Shire. Each scheme has a different level of service attached to it, so that's why it's not this postage stamp pricing for each of the schemes. Council has, over the past couple of years, undertaken a significant amount of work in reviewing the pricing structure for our water, sewer and most recently waste business activities. This indicates that over the next couple of years we'll be working towards a 2-tier water consumption system, as well as achieving full cost pricing in 2025-26. The reason why we need to work towards achieving full cost pricing is our water and sewer activities, business activities, are of a significant size to council, and we actually have requirements under the legislation to treat it in the same way as you would operate a commercial activity. So we are talking quite a significant service that we do provide for our community. The gross budgeted revenue for our water business is $24.2 million. We've also included as part of the resolution for transparency the price path over the next couple of years that are being proposed for both our water access and consumption charges. Councillors will be aware that we levy our utility charges, so the access charge in line with our rates notice on a half-yearly basis, and our water consumption is done on a quarterly basis, on a rolling quarterly basis throughout the year. Let me take questions.
Thank you, Madam CFO. And just to clarify a point for members of the community viewing in on live stream, as the CFO said, our water business now is of a size where under the law, under the legislation, we are required to treat it as a business. It is not a community service activity. It is a business. And therefore we are required, again, under the law, to charge full cost recovery. We have no choice about that. There is no option for us to charge below full cost. So that puts an emphasis on council then to make sure that we are charging appropriately, and that is reflected in this report. Question, Councillor Friend.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, through you to Madam CFO. So the increase is 10% on the water utility charges, is that correct?
Across the board, yes, Councillor Friend. There's significant investment that's required in our water infrastructure across all of the schemes to accommodate for the renewal of existing assets, as well as to accommodate for future growth, which has really driven that.
Okay, and as the Mayor has just noted, it is we're required under law through legislation to actually make sure that we treat this as a business. So that 10% rise across the board, does that bring that in line to the commercial side of the business?
So we'll achieve full cost pricing, so achieve full application of the National Code of Competitive Conduct in 25-26. So whilst it is percentage-wise a large increase across the board, we still won't achieve the full cost pricing target in the next financial year, in the 23-24 budget. So we are working towards achieving the full required rate of return a couple of years out.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? All right, can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Watson and Councillor Swaddling, thank you. Councillor Watson, did you want to speak to the report?
Just simply that with our water charges, I know that we're cheaper than other areas, and it's time we did make it, efficient and cost neutral at the end of it. So this is the way we have to go.
All right, thank you. Anyone speaking against? Councillor Swaddling, did you want to speak to the report as a seconder?
Yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. I mean, it is, and as the Chief Financial Officer said, we're looking at that growth in the future development of our infrastructure, and particularly it cost, and it's not a community service, it's an actual business now because of the legislation says it has to be that way. So yeah, I'm certainly supporting it. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to make a comment? Councillor Mather.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think people need to recognise that we are going to be a major contributor to the Rookwood Weir too, and this is going to influence our future costs and imposts on ratepayers. I don't think anybody would dismiss the fact that we need water for survival, and we've got probably, if not the best, the purest water in Australia. We would come very close second if we haven't, and we need to protect that. And what we need to do is to protect all of our communities as best as possible to ensure that that good supply goes to them at the best possible price we can afford. What we really need to know is that the prices will go up. There's no two ways about that, to be able to provide this pristine service. And at the same time, it's not going to be very tasteful for people having to pay the money. But what we need to do is to educate them, go through a long, drawn out, if we have to, process of showing them how they can read their meter, how they can monitor their consumption, and how they can reduce their own costs. Because water's not a commodity that we can actually turn the tap on and walk away from, because they're going to have to pay if they don't monitor their usage. Not blame the council because the charges are high. We provide the water, they need to have the control. So, Mr Mayor, I think we need to embark on a very good educational program to make sure that everybody is aware of how they can help themselves, because we can't hand feed everybody. We just need to tell them how to do it, and I'm sure they will cooperate. We just need to do it, and don't leave it too long before that occurs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. A very, very relevant point. All right, councillors, I'll wrap up discussion now. We'll go to the vote. We're going to move a Councillor Watson, seconded Councillor Swaddling. All in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. (9.8) Sewerage charges for 23-24. Madam CFO.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, we only operate one declared sewer area along the Cap Coast. The sewerage business activity is achieving the required rate of return. So for this one, it's more about maintaining that level of return required and assessing that in regards to the level of investment required to maintain existing infrastructure as well as expansion for growth. The gross revenue that will be generated from our sewerage scheme is about $13.5 million, which does include a 1% growth on rateable properties within the scheme area.
Thank you, Madam CFO. Questions, councillors? Councillor Friend.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Madam CFO, for all your hard work. Looking at maintaining the level of return, once again, my question is very similar to the last one. Is this 10% across the board? A 10% increase, I should say.
Yes, once again, it is an increase. So just like all households, the cost of council providing services and procuring goods and services, the cost of acquisition of our capital projects, the prices are increasing exponentially. So those forecasts, what we're required to generate from our utility charges in 1 year will also go towards the investing in our infrastructure into the future as well as paying down existing debt. So there's lots of components that do go into the required increases for our utility charges.
Thank you.
And just to support that point, Councillor Friend, as you know, Council in the Capital Works program in this year's budget will be spending around $14.3 million on sewage treatment facilities. All right. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Bello, thank you. I'm happy to second. Oh, Councillor Swadling is happy to second. Councillor Bello, do you want to speak to the report?
No, good report, Mr Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone speaking against? Councillor Swadling, did you want to speak to the report?
Yes, it's a good report. I mean, it quite clearly explains the processes what we're going through. In particular, what I'm pleased with is the considerations around potential growth and what we need to be doing out there within these areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone speaking against? No?
Not against,
Support?
Mr. Mayor.
Floor is yours, Councillor.
Just very quickly, the increase in the sewage charges would go hand in hand with the increase with the water charges. And I would like to see, in the not too distant future, sewage for the Kinka Beach area, because you've got a high water table there, and people no doubt have been sort of hanging on this one for a very long time. And we know that it would require probably a special charge, because nobody could cough up that sort of money to provide a service. But as we've done with so many, the revetment wall, with Nirimba water supply, Bangalee, we've done deals, financial deals with these communities where they've actually been able to pay it off. And I think this will be the only way that Kinka will be able to afford sewage over a period of time. But no doubt all of that communication would need to be had with the people, and we need to recognise the benefits in having that area sewered, and so the growth can continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. Any other comments before we close the debate? All right, we'll go to the vote on this one. Councillor's got a mover and Councillor Bello, seconded Councillor Swadling. All in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Sorry, who moved that, Justine? Sorry. Justine, who moved that? Sorry. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bello, thank you. You're right. 9.9, the waste management utility charges for 23-24. Madam CFO.
Thank you, Mayor. Council will be aware that we've done a fair body of work in the past couple of months on reviewing the pricing structure for the waste business to ensure that we're implementing the better practice cost recovery in line with commercial cost recovery requirements under the full cost pricing principles. So over the next 4 years, Council will be proposing to introduce a more equitable charging regime to ensure that all users of waste facilities are contributing to the cost of various facilities and services. However, before those changes are implemented, Council is committing to undertake community consultation to progress those recommendations to advance the best practice charging structures. The gross revenue budget before discount or rebates for waste is $8.4 million. It should also be noted that the waste utility charges also cover the cost of funding the 10 waste disposal vouchers at a cost of $517,000.
Thank you, Madam CFO. And I think, councillors, it's fair to say that future engagement in the waste space with the community probably needs to be around the continuation of those free waste vouchers, given that they do cost ratepayers approximately $500,000 every year to operate those. And just, Madam CFO, if I can ask you to maybe just advise people viewing it on live stream what the proposed capital investment going forward in waste is in terms of landfill cells, etc.
So the significant investment will be around the expansion of the existing landfill, so to move to sell another cell, which is going to be at least $8 million based on estimates, which they're still working through firming those up. That also means that we'll have a significant investment in rehabilitating the existing landfill. So that's at least $9 million investment on that basis.
Thank you. Now, councillors, those are all very large numbers, as you know, but turn that around and think of it in terms of growth. This is exciting. I mean, we are spending money for growth in this Shire, and it's absolutely awesome. All right. Any questions of the CFO?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you to Madam CFO. You said it was $517,000 for the waste vouchers this year. What was it in the previous year? I believe it might have been up to $1.1 million.
Prior to the introduction of a recent policy and a resolution by council, we were estimating it was over $1.2 million the cost of providing or redemption of those waste disposal vouchers. With the change in policy, it has significantly reduced, although just want to be really clear, they're not free waste disposal vouchers. It does come at a cost of revenue foregone, which is the estimated $500,000 that I've alluded to before.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Councillor Friend. Any other questions, councillors? All right. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Mather moving, Councillor Eastwood seconding. Thank you. Councillor Mather, do you want to speak to the report?
No, it's not my portfolio, Mr Mayor, but no doubt everybody has a special interest in waste and everybody has a responsibility. And I think we need to be guided by those people who have got their finger on the pulse as far as what our future costs are going to be and what people can afford to pay now. So if we've reduced the vouchers by $500,000, that's a big step in the right direction. And I think there'll be further discussion on that as we go forward. And I think that would need to come with communication, public communications, because once they understand the difficulties that council have in relation to trying to make the dollars fit their ability to pay, then they'll have a better understanding. Not that their ability to pay will be any better, but at least the understanding is what is needed in the community when we're trying to convince them we're doing the right thing. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you, Councillor Mather. Councillor Eastwood.
Yes, Mr Mayor, look, I will vote for this, and the main reasoning I'm voting for it is because we've retained the waste vouchers. I put council on notice that I won't vote for it in the future if we get rid of them.
Thank you. Anyone speaking? Sorry, Councillor. Anyone speaking against? Councillor Watson, the floor is yours.
I just more of a question, if anything. I note on page, 105, that on Great Keppel Island, its provision is of 1 waste MGB, 1 recycling MGB, and the same thing with combined waste and recycling for the rest of the Shire is 1 waste MCG. Can it be noted that Great Keppel Island actually is half the size of that, not a full size in future? Seeing that it's not the same service that everyone else gets.
All right, we'll take that. We'll ask the CEO to sort of take that under his wing, Councillor Watson. Thank you. All right, we've got a mover in Councillor Mather. We'll wrap up debate. Seconded Councillor Eastwood. All in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. 9.10, levy and payment for 2023-24. Madam CFO.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, this one is in regards to how frequently we levy our rates and charges, as well as the timeframe in which we expect those rates and charges to be paid within. So we're going to propose to continue with half-year levying of our rates notice. So that's our general rates, all of the other fees and charges except for water consumption. Water consumption, once again, retaining the status quo of levying quarterly on a rolling basis, and all of those with the requirement to be payable by the due date. There is one change that we are proposing to make this year, and that is around the time in which payments are to be made. So we're proposing to reduce it from 35 days down to 30 days. The benefits of that is that will actually allow officers to streamline and gain some efficiencies in processing the substantial volume of supplementary levies that we do have. So we'll be able to levy those a little bit more quicker upon receipt of the information from natural resources, as well as streamline our debt recovery processes as well.
Thank you, Madam CFO. Councillor Friend, question?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Madam CFO. Excuse me. With these levies, what is the difficulty in the future at looking at sending out the rates notices on a quarterly basis? We have discussed this, but it might be a good opportunity to let our constituents know why we're not considering sending them out on a quarterly basis.
I believe the discussions that council have had, it's really around the consultation required for the community. So in order to effect that for 23-24, we haven't undergone any of that consultation most recently with the community, and the consultation we have done in the past has had, I guess, mixed responses in regards to that. There is a fair body of work that's required to amend the system accordingly to affect those changes. It would also mean that supplementary levies wouldn't be levied throughout the year, that they would only be levied and aligned with those quarterly rates notices. It is something that we still do have on our list of future improvements or opportunities to take advantage of, but we're just trying to align those changes with future system changes to make it a little bit easier for our officers to implement such changes. So we'll keep you posted on that one, Councillor.
Thank you. That's good to know. One more question in relation to the 35 days as opposed to now the 30 days and reducing that time of payment. I imagine that there will be media and lots of information going out to the public to allow those people who have direct debits set up to then readjust those direct debits.
We'll take that as an affirmative, Councillor Friend. Yeah. All right. Any other questions, councillors? So I've got a mover in Councillor Mather, a seconder in Councillor.
No?
No,
No?
it wasn't. I don't think you had a move.
We're just bouncing around the screen a bit here. I'm trying to keep up with it. Yeah, indeed. Can I moving Councillor Friend? Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Swaddling, thank you. Councillor Friend, did you want to speak to the report?
There's no need to, thank you.
All right. Anyone speaking in opposition?
Not in opposition, Mr Mayor.
Well, the floor is yours, Councillor Mather.
Thank you. I don't know how many people would know this, but water was where I came in. A big fight with the council over water charges and how they levy them. And it's been something that I've been watching for many years to make sure that we get it right, and it's no real way to get it right. But what we're doing is trialling the best way we can to save money and to advise people what their consumption is. As I said earlier today, people need to take some more responsibility for their own usage. Whenever our water charges go out, their notices go out, then they rely on that. And if they find that they've got a bigger bill than they had last time, the first thing they do is pick up the phone and try and get an explanation. If they had a little notebook and they checked their water every week or every month, they would know when their consumption is up. They wouldn't have to be bringing the girls to say, can you explain this? We've been away for 2 weeks and you know the story, we've all had it. We need to stress the need for people to do their own checking. That's what we've got, because I remember that we tried this many years ago and the officer at the time, won't mention any particular persons, but they thought they'd try it this way. Then they thought they'd try it that way. We've been through many opportunities to get it right. One of those opportunities actually caused the state government to make an act of parliament to let let the council keep the money that illegally charged. I mean, that was a water fiasco, and I've still got the file if anybody wants to read it. I don't want to go through that again. I don't want our people to go through that again, because we just about ended up in court. What we're doing here is trying to streamline it and get the best advice to the people on a timely basis. And that timely basis is pretty well in conjunction with the distribution of the rate notices, which is to save money. And that's what we're all about, trying to make money and save money and get the best deal for the people. So what we're doing now, I'm hoping this will be the end result of a long season of water fiascos in my lifetime. So I can only stress again that we need to stress upon the people that they need to take responsibility for their own monitoring, and the rest will be a piece of cake.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. Any other comments or questions before we wrap up? Councillor Friend.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just have some comments Is this the wrap up?
Well, I'm just going to go. Does anyone else want to speak before Councillor Friend wraps up? Okay, the floor is yours, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although I have nothing prepared, it's very important that we levy these water bills and rates bills at certain times each year, and that the people are aware when they're coming out. Piggybacking on or segueing from Councillor Mather, we're one of the only councils in Queensland that still give a water leak rebate once every 5 years. Other councils may give them once over the lifetime of their property, but we still look at that. Not only that, when these water meters are read and the information and that data comes to the council officers, they then look at that data and send out letters letting the residents know that they have a high water bill. But I do agree with Councillor Mather that we're all in this together, and that the residents have a responsibility to actually check their own meter for water leaks as well. But also too, coming into El Nino, it's very important to know that we need to really conserve as much water as possible for our future hot summers coming along. So, but thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm fully endorse this levy.
Thank you, Councillor Friend. All right, we'll wrap up now, councillors. We've got a move of Councillor Friend, seconded Councillor Swaddling. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. 9:11 and my screen's just decided to die.
So, councillors, report
Thank you.
911 is in regards to interest to be applied for 23-24. So this is for when people are unable to pay by the due date. Interest is proposed to be at 7% per annum compounded monthly, but only applies at the end of the financial half year in which they fall due. So if someone is unable to pay their rates by the due date, interest isn't charged until the commencement of the next half year. Okay, so it's a bit of an interest-free period. It's also worthy to note that the Department of Local Government also prescribes the maximum amount of interest that councils can charge up to, which has been set at 11.64% for 23-24. Our proposal of 7% is actually the 6th year in a row that council has prescribed a lower interest than what the maximum prescribed interest is.
Thank you, Madam CFO, and to refer back to comments made previously, there are opportunities, lots of opportunities for ratepayers who are unable to pay their rates as a lump sum to take advantage of payment schemes to try and avoid any of the interest component as well. So we would encourage anyone to get in touch with our rates team to discuss options for payment. Councillor Bello. Thank you. Any questions, councillors? Right, we've got a mover in Councillor Bello. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Eastwood. Thank you. Did you want to speak to the report, Councillor Bello?
Yes, Mr. Chair. In some ways, it'd be good to think we didn't even need this policy. It'd be great to think that nobody needed to engage with council over hardship. But the reality is that we know that all of us at any stage, and many others, can be fall on hard times. And the encouraging thing is that this council is proposing to continue a very low interest rate in the event that a person finds themselves in those circumstances. In other areas, we have pushed up to the maximums that we can charge, but I think it's indicative of this council that our hearts certainly go out to those people who are ever in that situation, and we want to do what we can as a community to support them, and this is reflective of that in a small way. So, commend it to the table.
Thank you, Councillor Bello. Any other comments before we wrap up? Councillor Eastwood.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's pleasing to know that no interest at all is charged in that first half year. That was really cool. And keeping it at 7%, if you can't pay your rates, you're in trouble. So it's really good to be able to keep that as low as we can. And so, yeah, I'm glad that this council has decided to do that. Well, I encourage you to decide to do that.
Yep, thank you. All right, we'll wrap up, councillors. Got a move of Councillor Bello, seconded Councillor Eastwood. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. 9:12, Madam CFO.
Report 912 is around the proposed level of discount to be applied on our rates notices for 23-24. So once again, we're proposing to maintain the existing level of discount, which is 10%. on our differential general rates, sewage utility charges, water utility charges, and waste management utility charges. So it does exclude rural fire levy, emergency services levy, our special charges, and water consumption, as well as our separate charges. It is estimated that 90% of available discount is taken up. So this means that 90% of our rates are paid on or before the due date at each time that they are levied. The total estimated value of discount in 23-24 is $7.2 million.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Watson is seconding. Thank you. Any questions of the CFO before we go to discussion? All right, Councillor Eastwood, did you want to speak for the report?
Look, this is really exciting that we keep this. This is very, very, very important, and it brings our rates further in line, or makes our rates lower than they actually are. And what it means is that not only do we have an incentive for people to pay on time, so we get our money in, but it also means that our householders get that huge reduction. And 10%, Mr Mayor, is a large amount on many rates. So look, I do encourage everybody to support this, and I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem.
Hear, hear.
Thank you. Anyone speaking against? I think I know the answer here. No. Councillor May, do you want to speak in support?
Yes, in support, Mr Mayor, thank you. I'll make your day. The 10% is unchanged, Mr Mayor, and I don't think anybody in their right mind would try and avoid the 10% discount if they could afford it. And I believe that there have been rare occasions where people haven't paid their rates on purpose because they get bigger interest elsewhere. But I think while people are mindful of their responsibility to their fellow ratepayers, because if they don't pay, someone else has to pay their share, they wouldn't be not paying and getting a discount on purpose, I'm sure. That's why, as you said earlier, Mr Mayor, there are a number of avenues that they can take to assist them to get over the hurdle that they're facing. But they need to pick up the phone and ask to speak to somebody about that. I must stress that because they're shy, they're embarrassed if they've never done it before. And we have to make that journey a little easier for them because we're here to help. We understand everybody's having similar situations, so they're not alone. But I think it's important that we watch the trend in the future in our monthly financial statements to see if there's a marked increase in those people who are looking for assistance.
Indeed.
Thank you, because that means we have to intervene with the government then because the state's got to do something about that.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. And if I can just reiterate, there has never, ever been any judgment on the part of our officers on people who aren't able to afford to pay their rates up front. All right, so we've got a mover in Councillor Eastwood, seconder in Councillor Watson. Happy to go to the vote. Councillors, all in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. 9.13, Madam CFO, the rating rebates and concessions for 23-24 for our pensioners and community organisations.
Thank you, Mayor. This report is around adopting Council's rates, rebates and remissions policy. So Council offers 5 types of rate rebates and remissions to help alleviate the impact of our rates and charges, particularly in relation to not-for-profit community organisations and ratepayers who are in receipt of approved government pension or landowners with nature refuge agreements. So once again, Council is going to be proposing to maintain up to a 20% remission up to a maximum of $300 for eligible pensioners. And as Council will be able to see in the body of the report, Council does offer a relatively higher pensioner rebate than a lot of other councils that we had sampled. The cost of that particular remission is about $800,000. In regards to rebates and remissions provided for not-for-profit or charitable organisations, the total value of that is around $100,000. And nature refuge agreements, even though it is covering a substantial area of council, so 1,086 hectares of land is protected by nature refuge agreements, the cost is approximately $5,640 proposed for 23-24. So altogether, it's about $1 million is being provided in rating rebates and remissions for the 23-24 budget under this policy.
Thank you, Madam CFO. Questions, councillors? Okay, moved councillor Friend. Did your hand up second, councillor Swanley? Thank you. All right, councillor Friend, did you want to speak to the report?
Mr Mayor, only that we have an ageing population here in Livingstone Shire Council and that we need to look after our pensioners that come here in the twilight of their life to enjoy our beautiful surrounds and enjoy their community. So this is so important to retain these concessions and rebates as well. So I'm all for keeping them. And I think it's really important, a thing that we do. And yes, we do give more so to our pensioners than other councils, but this is important and never more so now than this particular budget this year. And they will rely on these concessions more so. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Friend. Anyone speaking in opposition? Okay, would anyone else like to speak for, or are we happy to go to the vote, councillors?
I'd like to speak for it, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Eastwood?
Yeah, Mr Mayor, just that this is great, and I think we should never, ever drop our rebates and concessions. To look after our needy and our elderly is the sign of a good society, and I think once you drop that, you fall apart. So I think that this is really, really important, and I don't think I need to encourage my councillors to vote for it, but you will. Thanks.
Thank you. Happy to go to the vote now, councillors? All right. Got a mover and councillor Friend, seconded councillor Swadling. All in favour? Carried unanimously. There's no doubt about that one. 9.14, Madam CFO, is the statement of estimated financial position for 22-23.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, with each annual budget, there is a requirement to also present an estimated position of the year that we're currently in. We're also taking an opportunity to present this revised position as a revised budget to close out the current financial year. So that is why it's a fairly extensive resolution, which includes all of the 4 statements, including the long-term financial forecast, the financial sustainability ratios, and the total value of changes in rates and charges, as well as our revised estimated business activity costs. So overall, our operating result is unfortunately looking to be a deficit for the current financial year. We were originally forecasting a very small surplus of $94,000, but the deficit is likely to come down to about $2.4 million. So the driver for this is really around the increases that we have had to process in regards to depreciation. So that's contributed by a substantial increase in the value of our assets, recent condition assessments in our water, sewer and building assets, as well as a change in our estimated useful life. It is also an advice from the department unlikely to receive a prepayment of the 2023-24 financial assistance grant, and we actually did receive 75% of the 22-23 allocation in the prior financial year. So we're only going to be receiving in cash 25% of our allocation in the current financial year. That is offset by substantial increases in interest revenue. So as the cash rate increases, our cash that we hold with our term deposits as well as with our banking providers has actually seen quite a strong return in investment that we're getting on that front. There are no changes to our total borrowings, and capital expenditure is forecast to reduce by 5%. And this is in relation to carryovers that have been identified to proceed into the next financial year. Councillors, you would see with the attachment for each of the financial statements, there is quite detailed commentary on any of the variances that are over $100,000 contained within each of the statements, as well as commentary associated with each of the financial sustainability ratios. So there's lots of information in there, so I'm happy to take any questions that you might have on our revised budget too, or estimated position at 30th of June this year.
Thank you, Madam CFO. And just a couple of explanatory comments for members of the community viewing it on live stream. The CEO made a very relevant point, CFO, made a very relevant point a minute ago. We were on track to offer a budgeted surplus, a small one, but what's happened here is that the value of our assets has increased, and that's a good thing because it means we're investing in our future and we're investing for growth. But alongside increases in valuation comes a requirement to reflect the loss of value over those assets over time, and that's called depreciation. Now, you can argue depreciation is a book entry and it doesn't necessarily affect too much. Well, in theory, what should happen with depreciation, that allocation, we should be spending that money on a continuous basis every year in renewing our assets. So if you have $1 million asset and you have $1,000 in depreciation, then theoretically you should be spending that $1,000 on renewing your assets. That doesn't always happen in situations in councils such as Livingstone that has a bunch of new assets, because there's not such a demand to renew those assets because they're already new. But certainly in making an allocation for that depreciation component with the increase in the valuation of our assets this year, that's taken us from a slight surplus to a $2 million deficit. So just trying to put some context around that for members of the community, because you might be alarmed to think that's a $2 million deficit. And I guess it's not necessarily a great outcome, but then certainly I don't think anyone around this table needs to be concerned about it, because it's going to be reflected, I guess, and covered going forward. The only real impact, I guess, that we need to be concerned about is the impact on our cash, and I think our cash balance, Madam CFO, is quite healthy. All right, questions? Councillor Friend? No? Okay. Any other questions?
Just a clarification, Mr Mayor. The $2 million deficit that we'll adopt today from the current financial year until the 30th is now absorbed into the new budget going forward. And we'll come up with a small surplus as a consequence.
The $2 million deficit, Madam CFO, you want to answer that one for me, please?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Councillor Mather. And it's also the reason why this is being presented as a revised budget. So because it is such a significant and material change from the original adopted budget, we wanted to, I guess, be really clear with what all the contributors are. So this has formed the basis for the 23-24 budget and long-term financial forecast.
Which has actually put a burden on this current budget. If we didn't have that deficit, it would have been a whole lot easier, and I guess the word is healthier, to be able to manoeuvre through those ranks. Yes, thanks, Andrea.
All right, can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Swadling, moving. I'm happy to second. Did you want to speak to the report, Councillor Swadling?
No, I think the report speaks for itself.
Thank you. All right. Are we happy to go to the vote, councillors, on this one? So we've got a mover, Councillor Swadling, seconder myself. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. 9.15 is the debt policy for 23-24, Madam CFO.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors were required to adopt a debt policy on an annual basis, and the attached policy provides Council's reflection on its position about responsible financial management, about funding loans for our infrastructure capital projects by ensuring that Council has the appropriate level of indebtedness that's within acceptable limits to Council. Throughout this policy, Council has identified that we do try to limit the use of borrowings and often refer to it as only to be applied to those projects that are considered to be of highest priority, and to borrow for, and is essentially, I guess, the last source of to be able to fund some of these projects. Different to previous years, there's actually $9.7 million being proposed in new borrowings for 23-24, and Council's overall debt balance will increase by $3.8 million to $58.2 million. However, it's important to reflect that since de-amalgamation, Council's overall debt level has reduced by $26.8 million to 30th of June this year. In recognition of this and the level of expansion and growth that the Shire is currently experiencing, Council is forecasting to borrow $31.8 million over the next 10 years to fund capital expansion of sewerage, waste and council facilities, which are really important for our growing community. The estimated balance of our total borrowings will be $54.4 million at the 1st of July. The next financial year will make provision for interest expense of $2.6 million and debt payments of debt redemption of $5.8 million, which will bring the total estimated book value down to $58.2 million. In regards to 23-24, there are two projects or two capital investments that are being flagged. The first one is to cover the capital costs for the Rookwood Weir water allocation based on best estimates on available information at present, as well as the balance of funding for the Emu Park sewage treatment plant upgrade. And the report contains the detail of the projects required over the next couple of years. It's also important to note that 3 out of the 5 existing loans are expected to be paid out by 2030, which that is, I guess, reflective of the downward trend you can see in the graph that's contained within the report of the downward trend of council's overall borrowings.
Thank you, Madam CFO. I'm happy to move this one, councillors. Can I get a seconder? Oh, right. Councillor Friend, thank you very much. Okay, so are there any questions of the CFO before we go to debate? All right, well, I think councillors, it's fairly safe to say that the level of reduction from 85 million to 55 million as it currently stands is an extraordinary result. And I can only pay homage to people around this table and also the officers, the CEO and his team who worked diligently, and the CFO to get that level of debt down. It was extraordinarily high as this council took office, and we've consciously been on a path to get it down to as low as we possibly can, because we identified in 2020 when we took office that going forward as part of our long-term financial forecast that we were going to have to spend a significant amount of money on growth. Now that growth, of course, has been larger than we've anticipated. And I guess a number of us will reflect that when we speak to the final report in 9/17 when we adopt the budget. But certainly we identified we would have to borrow for things like sewage treatment plants, water treatment facilities, upgrade to the landfill and the new cell. So congratulations, councillors, everyone around the table, in getting that level of debt down to what it is, because it is an outstanding achievement. All right. Happy to go to the vote, councillors. Any further discussion? Councillor Eastwood, do you want to make a comment?
No.
Oh, right. Councillor Bell.
Mr. Chair, I just probably wanted to, well, not probably, but I would like to make special mention, I guess, even to the former Councillor Hutton, who was very much integral to this council at the de-amalgamation, and he, along with the former mayor, but Councillor Hutton sat in that virtual treasurer's chair, I guess, and was a real strength in that space, and someone that I certainly look to often for advice, and I think his steady hand and influence is well respected by the community. So, thank you.
All right, so I've got to move myself, seconded Councillor Friend. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. 9/16, Madam CFO, is the significant and other business activities.
Thank you, Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, you would have heard me refer to a couple of different things today around the Code of Competitive Conduct, the National Competition Policy and full cost pricing. This particular report is what gives weight to some of those statements. So under the legislation, we are required to recognise our water and sewer business as a significant business activity because it meets the minimum criteria of having more than 10,000 premises connected to a water service at the previous financial year. Also under the legislation, we are required to identify our building certification activities as a prescribed business activity, and as well as our waste operations because it exceeds an expenditure threshold of $340,000. What this means is that we need to treat these particular activities as you would a business. So we have to apply the same process in terms of our pricing regime, as well as accounting for some other book entries around tax equivalents and pay payroll tax on some of these components as well. We do have a couple of other activities of councils that are identified as business activities because there are competitors or other businesses that are operating within our region that we are essentially competing against. However, none of those activities identified within the report exceed the minimum threshold for expenditure, but we do monitor those on an annual basis. The other component to this report, council, is identifying the cost of the community service obligation. So the detail of that is actually within the policy. So we have about $30,000 that we do provide for charities, community groups, as well as Capricorn Coast Land Care for disposal of waste and green waste at our land care facilities. We also have a nominal amount of $75,000 being the net cost of provision of waste services for island residents and public bins at Great Keppel Island. So these are things that a normal commercial entity would generally not provide. However, council's making a conscious choice to provide that. So that's funded from our general ratepayers. We spoke earlier around the cost of provision of the waste disposal vouchers. Well, this report identifies what those estimated costs of those redemptions, so that's revenue foregone or cash that we're not going to receive because people are redeeming those when they go to our landfill or transfer stations to use those to dispose of their waste. Happy to take any questions that councils might have on this particular report.
Thank you, Madam CFO. Questions, councillors? Councillor Friend.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a quick question to Madam CFO. So this particular report is all based on legislation that must be adopted anyway, is that correct?
That's right.
Any other questions, councillors? All right. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved Councillor Swadling, seconded Councillor Mather. Thank you. Councillor Swadling, did you want to speak to the report?
The report pretty explanatory.
Thank you. Anyone speaking against? Councillor Mather, did you wish to speak? All right. Any other comments, councillors, before we wrap up? All right, we'll go to the vote on this one. We've got a mover and Councillor Swadling, seconded Councillor Mather. All in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. All right. Lucky last and the big one, councillors, since 9:17 is the adoption of the 23-24 budget and long-term financial forecast. Madam CFO, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, today I'm presenting the capstone, which reflects all of the previous decisions that have been made by Council during this meeting today in regards to the budget and long-term financial forecast. So budget by reference is the proposed financial year as well as the two subsequent financial years, and the long-term financial forecast is for the period of 10 years, so 23-24 out. Also attached to this report is that we have the capital program for the budget, so a 3-year capital works program, as well as the proposed 23-24 team plans for consideration of council. So if I can just have a little bit more liberty of time, councillors, I'll just work through each of the statements. So there are 4 statements that are required to be adopted. So we have overall an operating surplus of $169,000. So it's not a large sum of money for a council or organisation our size in terms of an operating result. It will have some risks in terms of, will limit our ability to deliver additional or new levels of service or deliver new services throughout the financial year. And we do have to appropriately manage within the envelope. Overall, our total operating revenue is $110 million, and the majority of that is attributed to our net rates and utility charges. So overall, an average residential property will see a combined increase of all council rates and charges of 6.6%, which is about $5.27 a week. In regards to our operating revenue, so our largest operating cost is in regards to our employee costs associated with our employees. The second largest is in regards to materials and services, so both of those are $37 odd million. Our capital, so Livingstone does manage just over $1.3 billion worth of assets, so that's not an insignificant sum of money when you consider the value of our assets. We are proposing to invest just over $50 million into renewing existing assets as well as investing in new assets over the next financial year. Our cash balance remains strong, and we are monitoring how we have external obligations, so the externally restricted cash obligations on those funds. We've already spoken about debt, but when you consider the level of debt compared to the value of assets, our total level of indebtedness is quite small when you consider the level of debt that we have in terms of the $1.3 billion worth of assets. In regards to financial sustainability, so councils would be aware that the department are proposing some changes in regards to the measures of financial sustainability. However, for the 23-24 budget, the asset sustainability ratio, the net financial liabilities ratio and the operating surplus ratio are all remain. So we are proposing that whilst we have seen an improvement in regards to our asset sustainability ratio, we're still not proposing to be achieving the target of greater than 90%. Under the new framework, our target will reduce down to 80%. Because our level of debt, despite increasing our level of debt, we still have strong cash holdings, so we have more cash or cash assets than we do total levels of liability, so that's why it's a negative 26% there. And operating surplus is 0.2%, so that's reflective of the $169,000 surplus that we're proposing. I will just talk about the team plans a little bit, councillors. So these are not a legislative obligation. It's the first time that we're presenting these documents as part of our suite of budget resolutions. So essentially team plans are a plan on a page for each functional area of council. They're intended to provide the community with a greater understanding of the breadth and depth of services that we do provide, how much we provide, so the extent to which those services are provided, and any other key statistics or measures that describe what the budget buys for each of those areas. We've also drawn the alignment with the operational plan, and just to really round that out, any other performance indicators, projects or initiatives or other ways the team measures their performance are also included in those particular documents. Lastly, I'd just like to reflect that whilst I've had the privilege of speaking to all of the reports in today's budget agenda, it is certainly a massive team effort, and I just want to thank all of the officers, whether it's people collating data for the team plans, preparing business cases for the capital projects, working through our budget software to collate all of that, reviewing all of the policy documents. It's a massive team effort, and council should be really proud of the effort that the organisation goes to in preparing this, and it really demonstrates our value of teamwork to get to this point today.
Yeah, thank you, Madam CFO, and on behalf of Council, and I have no doubt I speak for everyone, we'd like to thank you and your team, not only for your perseverance and patience with us in going through the very lengthy process, because as people viewing it on live stream may or may not understand, we pretty much conclude one budget and adopt it, and then several months later, around about September, we start the whole process again. It is a long and protracted process, but a necessary one, and we thank you for your perseverance, your professionalism, and your patience with us, because clearly, this is a process that requires a great deal of expertise, and we need you to bring us along on the journey. So, councillors, I'm sure I speak for everyone in doing that, and can I may perhaps ask that that be recorded in the minutes, please, Justine? All right, councillors, any questions? Thank you. All right, I'll take the heat on this one, councillors, and I'll move it. So, seconded, Councillor Eastwood. All right, so just to, and please, councillors, this is an opportunity for everyone to have a say around the adoption of the budget. So I'll go around the table and invite comments. But certainly just wanted to make some overarching comments. This is a $161 million budget, councillors. A big number for us. And it's focused on leveraging the strong, or leveraging on the strong growth that this Shire has been experiencing. Certainly we're all aware that the population increase has been significant, and Livingstone has never gone backwards compared to a number of our other shires and some of our neighbours in terms of population growth. And as recently as late last year, Bob Truscott, one of our trusted and former employees, told us that the growth rate for Livingstone since COVID has been around 11%, which is a figure that we've never seen before. So this budget is focused on catering for that growth. We have a $51 million capital works program, and approximately 41 million of that is around roads, infrastructure, water and sewerage. So 41 out of that 51 is for growth, to cater for that growth in the Shire. And I think that's a reflection of your commitment, councillors and the officers, that we are serious about growth, because with growth comes the ability to expand, offer greater services, reduce rates, although in the current inflationary times that's difficult. But certainly the opportunity presents itself, or will hopefully present itself at some stage in the future. For residential ratepayers, as we know, there will be a rate increase, and a number of councillors I'm sure will mention this, but it's approximately 6.5%. But as the good deputy asked or clarified with the CFO, approximately 98.47% of ratepayers will experience a rate increase lower than that. So I think given that 7.4% CPI in Brisbane is the current figure, as I said earlier, Council has taken the strategic decision and the operational decision to absorb some of those costs. And that will be reflected, as I said, in greater efficiencies, but it's also reflected in the bottom line that we are pretty much bringing in a break-even budget. So there's no flash bells and whistles this time around, councillors. It is a pure investment in growth and infrastructure. And I think given the current climate, that's absolutely appropriate. And just to remind people, we are no different to the ordinary household. Our costs increase, our electricity costs increase. We currently use 55,000 litres of fuel every single week, and that brings a significant cost with it. We have wages, and we employ 400 people in this community, and we are proud to do that. And certainly keeping them employed and appropriately remunerated is a key focus for this council. And finally, in my wrap-up, councillors, I would go back to the Auditor General's report, because this is alarming. When you have 46% of councils out of 77 in this state that are at moderate to high risk of being unviable, that's as I said, that's a frightening statistic. And as I said previously, over the years, the CEO and I have been in local government a long time, as have a number of people around this table. And there's been a constant shift of responsibility from state government to local government over that period of time, and it continues. And the feds and the state really have to get serious about how they fund local government going forward, because the burden is now on, not on council, but it's on our ratepayers. And frankly, I think they've had enough. Between the cost of living, interest rates, and we are very conscious as a council of the impact of raising rates, and we don't want to do it. But because of the current inflationary pressures and this constant cost shifting, councillors, we don't have a choice. Because as Councillor Eastwood said, going forward, we have to be responsible. We have to bring in a budget that doesn't produce deficits, 2, 3, 5, 10 years out. We've got to be responsible for the next council that comes in and the council after that, because what we do today sets that platform. So councillors, I endorse the budget and I encourage you to support it as well. Anyone speaking against? Councillor Mather.
Mr Mayor, I'm in support in principle and in total of the budget, but for the separate charges, which I've always advocated. That's the only reason I'm voting against it, because it does take in the budget as a whole. Mr Mayor, you're very right in saying the devolution of responsibilities from state government to local government. I've been saying that for a number of years, and it's time that we stood up for ourselves and got our share. Because what happens if the state can't give us what the federal government gives them, we have to put it onto our ratepayers. And we have to bear the brunt of that pain, because the only place where the buck stops is with the people on the ground, the ratepayers. And we've got to protect that interest, because if we can't, we shouldn't be here. We are the barrier from the state to the people, and we've got to make sure that the state gets the message very clear. I have no doubt that Livingstone has a bright future. We've got all of the signs out there that people want to come here. We've got to keep them here. We've got to show that they do and can have confidence in us. Yes, so we've had a deficit for the last budget with what we had to face. I'm not surprised it wasn't more, because there are so many things that we need, and there is for growth, infrastructure for a start. And there are so many things we'd like to give the people, but I think they've got to the point that they understand that we can't give them all the pretty things that they want, as long as we provide them with what they need for this shire to continue to grow. So we need to retain that public confidence. We need to keep our belts tightened. The reduction in our debt in this term just ending now, it's half of what we're going to be borrowing up until 31. So that's not a very big figure considering the growth that we're having. So Mr Mayor, I'll stop there, but I'd have to again commend Andrea and her team and the officers who've contributed and the members who've all had a say in what's happened in the last few months, and no doubt it'll happen again. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mather. Anyone speaking in support? Councillor Eastwood.
Yes, Mr Mayor, and I guess I'd start off with saying sorry, but nah, it couldn't be helped. We've ended up delivering a budget that's, and I guess this is for most people within our shire, it's rates where they're going to feel it, that on average is going to be just over $5 a week per household, and for over 98% of people are going to be under CPI in their rate rise. And after a number of months of deliberating and meeting frequently with the officers and my fellow councillors, we formed a budget that works for the community and for our council. I'm not going to say too much here today, but because the crux of it's going to be in the media statement afterwards, I believe, and also in what the Mayor and the other councillors are sure are going to add to what I'm saying. But what I will say is it's become apparent that this was going to be a really tough budget, with CPI through the roof, interest rates going up, and supply chains for council disrupted, meaning the cost for business for council has risen substantially. And also, we're all too aware of the cost of living for those people that are in our community. Today we've delivered, or are delivering, a fair budget in a pretty tough economic climate. This is both to sustain council and assist us into the future. It delivers services and infrastructure for ratepayers, residents and visitors. Probably not as much cream as in the past for the cool non-essentials, but we'll do the best with what we've got. Excitedly, in this budget, we've made sure that we've kept the 10% discount for paying our rates on time and substantially bringing down our rates. And we've kept the tip vouchers, as well as looking after our pensioners and those that aren't doing so well. Plus, we've also reduced some of our separate charges, which was a great feat. Council won't just keep on keeping on. We aim to do better than that and make Livingstone an even more amazing place to bring up our kids, to retire, to study, to start a business, or to live our own dream. Councillors, the Mayor stated earlier that this certainly isn't an election budget. And I ask councillors to see the reality and vote for this budget and not make it part of your election campaign. We've made some tough decisions, but we're doing all right. So I encourage councillors to vote for the budget today.
Thank you, Councillor Eastwood. Anyone speaking against? Councillor Friend.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you to Andrea and all of your team. And this is not a reflection on the hard work that you've all put into. I just would like to note Councillor Eastwood's last statement about election campaigns, and therefore I'd like to paint a picture as to why I'm voting against it. As we know, the costs for councils all across Queensland have increased for steel and building materials, fuel and electricity costs. But for the general householder, Queensland electricity has risen 28% for all of those households. Food has gone up 10%. Accommodation, both rentals and mortgages, risen by 4.1%, which is the cash rate target. 3 of the 4 big banks predict this cash rate will peak at 4.35%. The Consumer Price Index in Queensland was 7.4% as of March this year. All of these rising costs certainly do impact council services. However, there is the human cost and great burden that is being placed upon the average household and family. I understand that Livingstone Shire needs to remain viable, and the good financial management in the last 3 years have kept us all in better stead. In fact, this particular budget report notes that over the life of the forecast period, Livingstone Shire Council maintains strong liquidity and adequate debt servicing capacity, resulting in adequate levels of financial flexibility. Because of this, and this is a good thing, therefore I'm looking at, should we actually be looking at figures on paper or the impact of the human burden for our ratepayers? It's a good thing we unanimously voted for the interest policy, the discount policy, and the rates and concessions policy, along with the keeping the waste vouchers. I believe Councillor Eastwood said earlier that he was adamant that he only wanted 5% rate rise, and then looked at the viability of this council, and I actually agree with his statement. Yet I think we could have absorbed more of the burden so that we are not the straw that breaks the camel's back for our ratepayers. Courage, Councillor Eastwood, comes in many forms, and at this time it shows itself by standing up for the average person and his or her hip pocket. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Friend. Anyone speaking in support? Councillor Watson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the Mayor said, this budget shows our Shire is growing. I see this every day riding my bike along the coastline. The traffic is just ridiculous on the road. But I'm happy the Council continues to support Capricorn Enterprise because tourism brings these people to the Shire. Some stay, some visit again. It is the livability of our region, and I know that is how our family came to live here. Some weeks ago, I spoke with a new resident who was concerned about our arts and culture. She thought it was all about the bulls. I look forward to the review of the arts and cultural policy that's coming up, because this review will give our arts community a future plan. But at the same time, I am a member of the Food Relief Capricorn Coast, and I see more and more people each week that I've never seen before. It's tough, and it's very tough. This is a fair budget with regards to our current economy, and I know many of our Shire's residents will feel this, but it had to be done. I look forward to speaking with the community in coming weeks when they get their rates notice. And thank you, and thank you very much for doing what you did.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Anyone else like to make a comment? Councillor Swadlin.
Well, my first budget, who would have thought? As I said earlier, all the councillors went through a lot of deliberations to get to where we were to here today. And I'm mindful of the hurt and the toughness that the community is doing out there and trying to live and trying to get through all the challenges thrown upon us by the current situation. But our community is no fool. They know that to remain sustainable, we have to give them a confident and a supportive local government. They don't need to be held by the hand and led on their way. They know. They're smart because they live in a good region. And they're strong in their commitment to their region. And they've got courage and initiative and understand. And we as councillors, as much as the decisions are here, it's sometimes hard and we have sleepless nights. We make these decisions in good faith for our community to continue to grow. And I see that by our figures. I see that by the amount of people that come and live here, the amount of people that come to me and just in my area and how enjoy not only just the coast, but our rural areas. It's tough out there and we all know that. But I think today what we've seen is we've worked hard, and every councillor is battled the same argument of what we do next in relation to the moving forward of our council and our community. But we need to stay strong. We need to have courage, and courage is delivering those sometimes hard decisions that we have to make. I think the state and federal government have a lot to answer in relation to the funding that they give local government. We do all the hard slog; they take all the biscuits, and it's not right. I know I'm not very political when it comes to local government, but certainly I think it needs a wake-up call to state and federal governments that our people out in our communities are doing it hard and tough. And stop overburdening local government with continued charge and continued lack of resources, like our hospital, like our lack of education facilities for high schools. Improve our roads. We give you solutions, you turn it down. So I think, we're working hard out there. We know people are doing it tough. But we couldn't do our job without the wonderful staff that we have. And putting this together, thank you very much for your team. It's hard for us to sit here and try to sell it, but it's even harder for you guys to do the work. We know how much work you put into putting this stuff together. So I certainly appreciate it as a ratepayer, but as also as a member of this group, who was a very well represented portion of our organisation. Certainly, my first stint at this councillor gig, I'm proud. I'm proud of the achievements that we've made here today, and it's been a long road, but we've got there. We've all had difference of opinions, but I think what we've done is we've managed to get through and formulate a budget that shows support, that shows a continued forward motion into the future for the development of our region, and I'm excited. I'm excited about that, and I think it's only a fool that would go backwards. I think we're good. I think we're in a good place. I think we've handed out a great budget, considering the difficulties out there, and we all are going to get questioned over this. But I'm confident we've done the right thing today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swanton.
Point of order, Mr Mayor. There have been remarks saying election campaigns and a fool who would go past this. Those that are opposing this budget this morning, I just want to bring those up, that those remarks are uncalled for. Thank you.
Well, Councillor, your comments are noted, Councillor, but I think the comments were probably just a generalisation. All right.
Certainly generalisation, not meant to anyone at the chair.
All right. Councillor Bello.
Thank you, Mr Chair and staff and councillors. A budget is a significant occasion, and whilst it may happen in the movies, Chris Voss says that you don't rise to the occasion, but you rather sink to your lowest level of preparation. And what that ultimately means is that preparation is the key to your performance. It's the key. And what this budget is about is preparing our community for today, for the year ahead, for the years that come after that. The decisions we make today very much influence what happens into the future. I would very much like an alternate budget that has a lower general rate rise. I really would. And I was determined and hopeful throughout that budget process that all of a sudden our CFO could just provide the recipe that said, here it is, councillors, I've done it. It would, and we had some conversations late in the piece where I was trying to see if we could compress down those who were going to be paying above the CPI, to bring them down so that nobody paid above CPI. I think we would all aspire to do that. When I saw that, upwards of 98% were going to be paying below the state CPI, so we're going to be bringing in 98% paying less than 6%. Some years ago, the thought of 6% would have put shudders through me. And I think through the broader community, but I sense the community understands that we're not in an enviable position here, and that a budget increase where the majority are paying less than the CPI and at around 6%. I think nearly 70% are paying between 6 and 4%. Those figures are pretty responsible. They're pretty good for the community. I'm not saying that we deserve a massive pat on the back and, you know, we can go out there and expect we're going to get a round of applause at all. But I think this budget is really setting us up to be able to perform sustainably into the future. As our community absolutely grows, it's a destination of people want to live in. But we need to be able to put in the hard yards here today. I apologise to those who are going to pay more than CPI, and there will be some of you. I think there's one rural property that's paying 15%. I'm very sorry that that's the case. The complexities of a budget, though, that's the way it comes out in the wash. I won't go through all the various capitals and, you know, the positive things that we're going to be spending on, which there is a lot of positives. There really is. And I'm sure each portfolio holder will have the opportunity to do that. But just to conclude, I'm reminded that there's a quote that says that hard times create strong people. Strong people create good times. Good times create weak people. And weak people create hard times. Today here, for me, it's about being strong in a way that I have to go out to the community and say, this is the budget we're putting down. These are the rate increases at 6.5% and 4.5%. I know that's tough. But what I believe it will do is it'll ensure that the good times continue for the people of Livingstone with the services that we need to be able to provide. All of the things that we said here today that very quickly we were all prepared to put our hand up and ensure that, you know, the pensioner rebate, the waste vouchers, the 7% discount if you can't pay your rates. That shows that we have a huge heart here. We love to see our community do well, and we know that some will struggle with this budget. But by and large, it is a budget that is going to set up good times for the people of Livingstone, both who live here today and into the future. Had you been able to provide me with an alternate budget that had a sustainable future with a lower percentage increase, I would have got behind you. I would have got behind that. But for me, this is the best place we could have landed. And so to all the councillors that contributed through the budget cycle, to the Mayor, your leadership through that cycle, and to our staff, the CFO, the CEO and all of the staff, we are stronger to have you beside us, and I believe our community will judge us on our fruit. And I think our fruit here today is going to taste better than what we thought it could. So I'll conclude with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bello. All right, councillors, we'll wrap up. I'll just make a few concluding remarks if I can. When this council took office in 2020, we were number 2 as in the highest rated councils in Queensland. Now, I'm not suggesting we need to pat ourselves on the back, councillors, because at the moment, with general rates and utility charges after discount, we are now sitting at number 10. Now, that is a great outcome, but there is still way more work to do. Now, whether this budget has an impact on that positioning, time will tell. But I suspect there will be a lot of our colleagues in local government land who will be looking at similar situations in their budget. They won't be particularly happy about the type and quantum of rate increase they will have to bring in. But I can't imagine anyone not bringing in a rate increase in the current economic climate. If I can just make a couple of comments in relation to add to Councillor Friend's comments. I take on board her comment around some sort of measure for community hardship. I would love that. I'm not sure what it is, but I would love to see that. But unfortunately for us, and I'm not denigrating your comment at all or your opinion, Councillor Friend, the Queensland Audit Office, the Department of Local Government, Queensland Treasury Corporation requires us to work on a financial basis. And I know you get that, but certainly while those imposts are placed on us from high above, we have a responsibility to abide by that. And that's why I support this budget. I think, as everyone around the table has said, it's not necessarily where we wanted to be or what we wanted to deliver, and we are conscious of the impact on the community. But certainly, we also have to have an eye to the future. We have to set future councils up, future communities up to prosper and around the growth that's going to happen in this part of the world. And that's why I support it, councillors. So we've got a mover myself, seconded Councillor Eastwood. We'll go to the vote. Councillors, all in favour? Those against? Very close. And it's carried. All right, so given that's the entire agenda for our special meeting today, and there's nothing further, councillors, I thank you for your time. Again, I thank the CFO, the CEO and our team for all of their hard work in getting us to where we are today. Thank members of the community who viewed in on live stream. And as Councillor Bello said, I look forward to the conversations within the community. So have a great day and travel safely going home. Thank you.